Hello. In 1988, about a year into the life of Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, there was a new product released by Citadel that was utterly, fabulously iconic. The Harlequins were a new type of Eldar Xenos, a troop of warriors as flamboyant as they are deadly, taking cues from Italian comedy theatre during the Renaissance, Warhammer Fantasy battles, wood elves, and the indescribable brilliance and creativity of Jez Goodwin. There had never been something quite like them seen before, and they've never been forgotten since. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and for the next 10 minutes I'm exploring the history of this beautiful box of Eldar Harlequins. The Eldar were present in the very first edition of Warhammer 40,000, as tall, pale, alien humanoids that lived on and traded from vast craft-world spaceships, and whose Corsair raiders were a thorn in the side of other spacefaring factions. In fact, an Eldar, along with a futuristic dwarf, actually snuck into a White Dwarf heavy metal column before Rogue Trader was even released, making both factions truly ancient indeed. In further supplements and releases for the game, more would be explored of the craft worlds and their unique cultures, but the initial Eldar miniatures represented generic troops from any Eldar group. That would change with the introduction of the Harlequins, the first sub-faction within the Eldar, presented with their own society, mores, and miniatures. But to create them, Games Workshop would open their minds to many intriguing possibilities. Back in the early days of 40k, inspiration was drawn from a number of different classic science fiction works, but Rick Priestley himself has told me that there was one world, one setting, one universe that was more influential than any other: Warhammer Fantasy. Because this unproven new sci-fi game needed to come with a ready-made range of miniatures, a lot of Warhammer Fantasy models were detailed, even in the broadest sense, in the Rogue Trader core book. You could convert your regular orcs into space orcs, your fantasy dwarves became space dwarfs, and even ogres could become feral ogrins from backwards worlds. In the beginning, one of the factions that would be known as Eldar was also called the Space Elves, but in time that name would disappear from view and Eldar would become the common name, and that is a name that has its roots in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. It's one of the ancient factions of elves from Middle-earth, and there would be further evolutions as well. Initially depicted as a faction of space pirates, the Eldar would become untrustworthy in different ways as they evolved over time. But it would be in September 1988 that we would get the first glimpse of one of the sub-factions of the Eldar, and it would be magnificent. That was the first appearance of the Harlequins. They were a curious mix of styles and inspirations, but the influence from Warhammer Fantasy was clear from the start. These were the science fiction equivalent of the Wood Elf War Dancers. As Warhammer's elves took shape as distinct factions, the War Dancers became associated primarily with the Wood Elves, a band of highly skilled, ostentatious warriors inspired by Celtic history and aesthetics. The Warhammer miniatures range was expanded in part through the creation of Regiments of Renown, unique boxed sets that featured a single unit of warriors with full backstory and characters. The likes of Golgfag and his mercenary ogres became long-running denizens of Warhammer's world, but they started as one-off releases. The Wood Elf Scarlock and his mercenary archers were another, and his champion was a war dancer named Glam, the Laughing Warrior. Designed by Jez Goodwin, the Scarlock unit continued to explore the look and feel of Wood Elves as rangers and woodsmen, but with Glam, it also established the aesthetics of the War Dancers, taking on the look of Celtic tribes like the Picts, a name derived from the Roman description of the fierce northern Scottish tribes that painted their bodies with elaborate blue tattoos. As 40k started to sell well, a decision was made to start producing dedicated boxed sets for this game too. Along with the move into plastic with the famous RTB-01 Space Marines, there were also a series of metal sets, like the Space Orcs and the legendary Terminator Squad. Only one of the 40k boxed sets would take much the same approach as the Warhammer Fantasy Regiments of Renown, creating not just a squad of generic models, but a unique background with key lore and characterful miniatures. It would also be the only 40k box to carry the actual branding for the Regiments of Renown as well. This brand new Harlequins box included 18 individual metal models, 8 troopers, 3 death jesters, 2 avatars, 1 high avatar, 2 warlocks, 1 high warlock, and appropriately enough, just a single solitaire. In the Realm of Chaos Slaves to Darkness book that was also released in 1988, there was more exploration of the detail around the fall of the Eldar at the hands of Chaos, and it also introduced the Black Library of Chaos, a repository of eldritch wisdom secured on a dark craft world and accessible only by the human Illuminati and the solitaires of the Eldar Harlequins. The release of the Harlequin box set was accompanied by 2 articles in White Dwarf, one providing army lists and extra game rules, the other in White Dwarf 105 exploring in detail the background for these magnificent Eldar fighters, featuring some evocative images of the Harlequins drawn by Jez Goodwin. It was written by Graham Davis, one of the key writers behind Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and a regular contributor to White Dwarf at the time. When I asked him about the piece he wrote for White Dwarf, Graham Davis told me that actually it was Jez Goodwin who was the main driver behind not just the miniatures, but the lore as well. Jez always developed lore and sculpts in parallel. In the White Dwarf 105 article, I was mostly transcribing from his notebook, though we developed the Dance Without End fiction together. The war dances were definitely Celtic inspired. Jez and I sat down and reinvented wood elves from their original Warhammer concept and looked to Celtic and woodland Indian sources for inspiration to make wood elves wild and feral and hopefully more appealing. The Harlequins were less overtly Celtic, though I always used Welsh and Gaelic, lightly mangled for readability and ease of pronunciation when creating Elven and Eldar words and names. Davis also confirmed that there was likely at least one other inspiration also playing a major role in the creation of Jez Goodwin's Harlequins, and the name itself is a pretty clear sign, because the Harlequin is actually a character from a Renaissance form of theatre called Commedia dell'arte. Originating in Italian theatre and popular across Europe between the 16th and 18th centuries, Commedia dell'arte is a form of comic performance that makes use of various stock characters, each of whom has a regular and particular role to play in the story, and a unique function in the comedy. One such stock character is Arlecchino, better known today as Harlequin. Popularised around 1585, the Harlequin is a light-hearted and resourceful servant, most often seen in his checkered outfit and black mask and carrying his famous slapstick, the device that would be used to make a loud noise and magically cause the sets to change. It's from here that we get the term that became even more famous thanks to the likes of Mr. Blobby. The Harlequin name dates back even further, including as Harlequin, in an 11th century Old French tale in which a monk is tormented by a troop of masked demons. It is from medieval passion plays. The later Harlequins of the Commedia inherited physical grace and their inherent nature as tricksters. The extent to which Jez Goodwin was drawing on different aspects of Commedia dell'arte when he was creating his Harlequins is something that only he can speak to. But it seems possible that given the very nature of the Eldar Harlequins as a troupe of tricksy, theatrical characters with very clearly defined roles, that this may be more than just a passing homage. And that is before you even start talking about the iconic masks and checkered outfits. The cover art for the Harlequins box was by David Gallagher, the exceptional artist who would create many amazing pieces for Games Workshop over the years. In it you can see the incredible fashion sense of the Harlequins. Vibrant colours, yellows and reds, mismatched checkered and patterned outfits, long cloaks and enormous collars, and of course the incredible visage of the different masks that made these furious warriors look just as theatrical as they would be terrifying. It's hard not to see at least some elements of David Bowie-style creativity, and even punk aesthetics pasted on the jackets and the magnificent mohawk hairdos. Of the piece, Gallagher wrote on Instagram, "Garish colours and bold patterns can be oddly camouflaged when grouped together. This was the first time these characters were depicted in colour, I think. I don't recall seeing anything beforehand. I was asked to feature every character for this box set, as far as I can remember, or at least as many as I could cram in. In the first Heavy Metal showcase of the miniatures, those same vibrant colour schemes look just as brilliant on the models themselves, fully bringing to life Jez Goodwin's magnificent creations. Another slightly different Dave Gallagher Harlequins image was featured on the cover of White Dwarf 105, announcing in grandiose fashion that the Harlequins' first performance was about to begin. There is plenty more that could be said about this incredibly creative box of stunning figures and inventive ideas, but I am all out of time. I would encourage you to check out patreon.com/Jordan Sorcery if you want to see more of my work. You'll get interviews, articles, and exclusive and new early access stuff. It is also the best way to support me if you want to see more of this kind of thing in the future. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.